everybody. Welcome back. You're listening to the Ancient Health Podcast. I'm so stoked about this conversation because I already know in the first 5 minutes of talking to our guest today that this is going to land for many of you, because I know that the majority of our listeners are people actively looking for health solutions, and they're doing the research, and you're tuning in and you're putting the puzzle pieces together for your health. But there is a large portion of people that are doing a lot of the right things and they're still not seeing the outcomes that they desire. And that is what our guest today specializes in. She is giving a voice to the people that are doing the right things. They're living the lifestyle. They're eating all of the right foods, and yet they're still not seeing the breakthrough that maybe their neighbor or their friend is seeing. So if that is you, you're going to want to listen and take notes on this conversation. I know that this is going to help you make sense of things and probably give you a deepened level of peace around your healing journey, because I know how isolating it can feel when you're working really hard and you don't see the needle moving. You're not seeing the fruit of all of your effort. And that can be really discouraging. So Michelle Shapiro is our guest today, guys. You're going to love her. She is brilliant, so smart. She has her own podcast, which we'll even talk a little bit about that. She's a registered dietitian. She's helping individuals in group fashion, individually. But like I said, I feel like her sweet spot, and she casts a big net in what she can do and all of the knowledge she has and the impact she's having. But she is really empowering those highly sensitive people that need a more tailored approach and understanding of the bucket of the things that are working in their bodies for their healing journey. So Michelle, thank you so much for joining us today. I can't wait to dive in.
Honestly, Courtney, I think that was my favorite intro I've ever heard. No wonder you're the podcaster you are. Thank you so much. And I'm so excited to be here.
Oh, that was so sweet. Well, thank you. I mean, I'm just so delighted to have you. And honestly, I am so thrilled for our listeners, because I know, like, I've experienced it, and I have a lot of friends and women, and I have deep compassion for them because I see them doing a lot of work, and then I see the disappointment and I see the frustration when they're like, why is it that I'm doing what you're doing, or I'm doing what this person's doing, and I'm spending all this money and I'm working really hard, but I actually feel like I may be even getting worse. Like, what is going on? Like, why is this not working for me? And you have really stepped into an area where you're acknowledging that it's not a lack of effort. It's not that there's something else missing, but you're helping understand that, hey, you may be a type of individual that has proclivities in different areas. It doesn't mean that your journey is just going to be miserable and hard. It just means that we need to understand those complexities a little bit better. Once we understand it, now we have things that we can utilize to set you free, to help you get into a trajectory of healing. So maybe we can just start there. Yeah. What is it that got you into, or how did you discover that there's this kind of subset population, which, like you said, pre-shows, it's becoming the larger portion of the population of highly sensitive people?
Yeah. So we actually even take that term, which is a trademark term by Elaine Aron, by the way, of highly sensitive people. And we've kind of gone off and made one called HSB, which is highly sensitive bodies, because people were oftentimes HSPs have HSBs, by the way. So oftentimes people who are highly sensitive, also it shows up in their body. What was happening, Courtney, is the first half of my career, I really worked with clients on weight loss, anxiety, and gut issues. I have a personal history of losing 100 pounds. During my weight loss process, it was very drastic and never would I recommend it to anyone. During my weight loss process, I noticed myself getting a lot sicker. And so I really wanted to work with clients to lose weight in a way that is not only potentially, mentally damaging from a disordered eating perspective, but also in a way that's physically supportive. I basically had been working on that, let's call it, for the first 6 years of my private practice. And then I had mold and COVID exposure that happened at a very similar time frame. And it kind of turned my body into something that I didn't recognize. And I had already been in the functional nutrition space for a long time, but I was having symptoms that even I couldn't understand. My functional medicine doctor friends couldn't understand. My naturopathic physician doctors could not understand. And it looked like this kind of body anxiety that I couldn't explain. It looked like insomnia that was severe. And it looked like digestive issues that didn't follow my usual pattern. And so I started to think about and put these pieces together of why is my body acting like this? And why can't I understand it? And why can't all these practitioners who I consider to be still to this day, some of the best practitioners in the world, why can't we figure this out? So then I went on this hunt for what is going on? What is this body reaction that's happening in my body and others? And then I started seeing an explosion of these severe acute symptoms that became chronic in a lot of my client population. So I started to develop resources and information understanding of what is this highly sensitive body and why does it always do the opposite of what we want it to do?
That's incredible. I mean, that weight loss journey too, like that's so significant. And I'm interested to hear too, like in what ways did you feel like, because there has to be some level of, okay, I'm achieving what it was I set out. Like I'm losing some of the weight, but then there's also this like counterbalance of like, but I'm not feeling better. So what was it? What were the symptoms that you were feeling and what did you end up connecting it to? What are those underlying conditions? Or maybe even what are the most common underlying conditions that people are not? You mentioned COVID, and mold, but there's got to be other ones too, because this is something that really needs to be unpacked is understanding that you could even look like you're achieving health, but actually be increasing disease states in the body. Exactly. And that's something like it's hard to understand because it's looking like it's what you're wanting it to look like, but then you're not feeling like you're in the body that looks strong.
100%. Yeah. So I would say I had two like clusters of symptoms in my life. The first was when I lost weight initially, and I had done it through a drastic vegan diet, which I would not recommend, a drastic calorie restriction. And like in total transparency, Courtney, I was going to college to a place that was much more homogenous than where I was from. I'm from New York City. I'm from Queens, New York. And I realized like having grown up in a larger body, when I go away to college, I'm going to have to like fit in a little bit differently. Like I had so many friends, I had like a beautiful life, but people knew me and people aren't judged in the same way. It's not as homogenous of a place. So I was going to the University of Delaware and I realized if I'm going to have to lose weight when I go there. So I lost that 100 pounds in like close to 3 to 4 months before college. I basically just stopped eating. And this is like a huge trigger warning because I don't want anyone to do what I did. Please do not do as I did. Please. And I went to school and I had severe panic attacks, thyroid issues, acid reflux, diarrhea, like any gut condition you can think of. And I just felt so unsafe and unsettled all the time. And that really came from like dramatic nutrient deficiencies. Also, when we lose weight, our fat cells will release toxins that are stored within our fat cells. And I didn't have any nutrients, having been on a long-term vegan diet, that would help me to facilitate that liver detoxification. So weight loss itself can be kind of this toxic overload. Then I kind of stabilized those symptoms for a couple of years, and then mold and long COVID came along. And what I think is really important to say is that it wasn't the mold or the COVID itself that actually caused my symptoms. It was when I did a mold detox.
How do we know if we're somebody that has these conditions or like the conditions associated with a highly sensitive body? How would somebody be able to identify that? And I think that's probably a really good place to start.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when I'm talking about those in a highly sensitive body, I'm usually circling around 3 conditions. Mast cell activation syndrome, you said histamine intolerance. They're not interchangeable, but they're interchangeable enough for the context of this conversation. And we'll talk about the difference. POTS, which is postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is basically when you stand up, you get really dizzy and your heart starts pounding really hard. There's a lot of other symptoms to POTS too, but that's one that people primarily see. And then hypermobility. So when I think it's 5 or more of your joints basically hyperextend, there's a class of conditions called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. There's actually 30 different types of hypermobility. Just Ehlers-Danlos. There's other types of hypermobility too, but that's kind of the 3 conditions that what I would call travel together. And I think for us to understand how are you this person, I think I'm going to start us with MCAS and talk about even what is a mast cell. And by the way, I've seen an explosion online about histamines recently, which I'm excited to see, but I still think people are missing the mark on how it relates to your real life. So mast cells are these highly intelligent white blood cells. They're part of our immune system. And they have this feature where basically they have an outside. Something will attach to the outside, and then they carry these sacs of mediators, chemicals, and they'll release those chemicals when something attaches to the outside. The reason why mast cell activation syndrome has become so relevant to us is because one of those mediators is histamines, and people will get a lot of tricky symptoms when it comes to histamines. Additionally, very unfortunately, COVID, the actual virus, attaches to these cells. So that's why it's estimated between 20 to 35% of Americans have long COVID, which is like a huge number. And you can imagine that this is probably grossly underestimated. I think it could be possibly 50% of the population. In my world, long COVID, 99.9% of the time is actually mast cell activation syndrome. So This is really fascinating, Courtney. When I was going through everything I was going through, I was having these tremors at night that were keeping me awake, like violent tremors. And you have to understand, I'm a person who has great control of my mental anxiety. So when I'm experiencing physical stress, I know if it's like coming from something physical or mental. And I was having these tremors, and my best friend was sleeping over. It was the night before my bachelorette. And he said to me, like, are you having a panic attack? Is that why you're shaking? And I was like, no, this is something I can't explain, but it's physical. So I started looking into, I don't know, long COVID stuff, because I was like, maybe this is related to COVID. I started looking online, and I found the study that showed that Pepcid, like that acid reducing drug, that over-the-counter drug, helped in this. There was one trial with like 16 participants, and it gave an 80% reduction in symptoms to at least 14 of them. And I was like, Pepcid? Why would an acid blocking drug help people with long COVID? And it's because Pepcid's actually an antihistamine. It's an antihistamine that works on the gut. And because it works on the gut, it actually works on the vagus nerve too. So it's really fascinating, because I find people who have anxiety that they're taking antihistamine drugs, not understanding like, this just makes me sleep better and this makes me feel better, because it's usually a histamine issue. So that's where I started realizing, oh my gosh, is this all about histamines potentially? So mast cells really release thousands of other mediators outside of just histamines, but histamines can create tremendous symptoms for people, again, in ways of insomnia, anxiety, gut issues, frequent urination, any other urinary tract issues. There's mast cell receptors in every cell of our body. Basically, they're in all of our connective tissue, which lines our entire body. So we can get symptoms from anywhere, and those symptoms can be very, very severe. And when we do things like, let's say, take an IV, anything that can be potentially triggering to those mast cells, which are like kind of like the watch guards on the tower of our bodies. So they're like always looking. They're looking at everything. Anything that seems like too much in any area, mental, physical, anything, can trigger those mast cells to say, there's something wrong. Let me talk to the rest of the immune system and the nervous system, and let me send out a bunch of these mediators. So something like a mold detox is very disruptive to the body. So it's something that can really push those mast cells to release those mediators and cause those tricky symptoms. That was a lot. Sorry. This is incredible.
I mean, I'm learning so much too, because it's kind of refreshing my mind on MCAS. Because honestly, it is one of those things that a lot of times, if you're not knowledgeable enough about, it's not going to be on the radar of what you're suspecting. So I'm glad that you're breaking this down, because it's helpful to understand that these are natural, like histamine release in the body is natural. It's when it's in excess, right? And so when the body can't break it down, and which requires different enzymes. So how does somebody, maybe they suspect that this is an underlying cause of some of their symptoms. How would they go about bringing balance to the immune system and these mast cells so that their body isn't triggered in overproducing these chemical mediators and creating this cascade of inflammation or breakdown?
That's the exact right question. There's a couple different ways. The fun part about these mast cells is because they're responsive to any safety signal, anything you do to help your nervous system is also going to help the mast cells to kind of calm down. There's a very intricate relationship between our nervous system and our immune system. So anything we do to work on the immune system and will work on the mast cells too. In total honesty, a lot of times you have to do a lot to bring those histamines down at first. And I really have people go through a pathway of like, first work on the nervous system and bring the histamines down, and then you can have some fun with detox and all those other things. Histamine breakdown primarily happens in the liver. So a lot of times people want to jump into liver detox protocols, but that's going to be very reactive for your mast cells, obviously. So the answer is, the first thing we do is try to stabilize any of those chemical mediators and then work on the nervous system. And that is the hardest work, and no one wants that answer, but it's really about making your body feel safe again. And sometimes medications are needed to lower the histamines too in the beginning, because those symptoms they can be very, very severe.
Yeah. Do you recommend like any enzymes like, I don't know, DAO or like
HNMT? Yeah. Sorry, you cut off. Yeah, I love a DAO supplement. So when it comes to actual supplementation, you can either take things that will basically block your body from understanding that there's histamines floating around so you don't have the symptoms. There's things you can take to literally help the enzymatic breakdown, like a DAO supplement, diamine oxidase, for the actual liver. That's really, really supportive. And you would take that before meals. There's supplements and herbs like perilla extract, which also helps with the inflammatory response. And then just really simply, when it comes to herbs, like nettle leaf tea is really supportive. Ginger actually acts on the same histamine receptors as Pepcid does. So drinking ginger tea can be helpful. There is a little bit of a tricky piece with like ginger and more spicy stuff because histamines and acid reflux have a bidirectional relationship. So oftentimes the more histamines you release, the more acid you release. A lot of people in this population have chronic reflux. So you don't want to instigate reflux in any way. And then when it comes to actually just not introducing too many histamines or too many mediators, just some people will engage in like a low histamine diet, but I don't really recommend that across the board because it is highly restrictive. I would try to see what your triggers are or introduce something like a DAO supplement to help break down the food. It's a really harsh elimination diet, and people who are feeling unsafe in their bodies, that could create a lot more unsafety. It's sometimes necessary, and those foods would be fermented foods, citrus fruits, tomatoes, spinach, and very funny, like something like bone broth, because they are literally like the healthiest foods you could ever imagine. So this is where someone can start thinking, maybe this is me. If they eat foods that are really healthy, or they start a new exercise routine, or they start like introducing these amazing, probiotic rich foods, and then they notice they get sicker, that's a hint you might be in a highly sensitive body.
That is interesting because bone broth is high in histamine.
Yeah.
And so
it
is interesting. A lot of times we default to just like, okay, we'll clean up our diet, but sometimes, you may see some counterproductive effort there, at least initially. Like I'll notice that too. Even in the kids, which do you see this in children at all? Where like there's a lot of kids that deal, because I have one child that for sure is like the definition of this body type. Like she has, exactly what we're describing. And I have to kind of, again, like the nervous system piece is so important, but how would you counsel a parent maybe that even suspects that they have a child going through this?
Yeah, I think that, again, it's so hard, but you have to stabilize those histamines, whether it's through herbal or medication sources, because then you're also getting skin rashes, weird digestive stuff, and it can really impair a child's quality of life. So it's definitely about, or if it's not histamines, maybe it's another mediator, maybe it's cytokines, maybe it's something else that's causing a lot of the reaction. So the first step would be either stabilizing the mast cells. There's like even little nose sprays like called nasal chrome, which is chromalin sodium, which is a mast cell stabilizers. Anything you can do to stabilize the mast cells is really important in the beginning, because yes, nervous system regulation in children is like, it's easier said than done. Come on, like they're kids, like please, like spare me. Yeah, exactly. But then that's what I would be focused on. And then eventually getting those nutrients back into the diet so that your liver can function properly and process out histamines. Like you said, also, it's not a matter of only you have too high of a buildup of histamines. In the case of histamine intolerance, it's that your body's recognizing them too much and that's causing a reaction, or you're not getting rid of them. So it's about kind of firing on all fronts, I think, at the same time, but going down a slow and careful path with it. But a little bit of nervous system, a little bit mast cell stabilization, a little bit of histamine help. And they could absolutely drink nettle leaf tea and herbal remedies like that are supportive too, if they're willing to.
Okay. What's your experience with relief from some of this? Like how long, if somebody's like, okay, yep, that sounds like me. If I start to kind of work on some of these different pieces, am I going to notice a difference immediately? Or how do I know if these things are working or if I need to go deeper? I think that can get to be like some muddied water because we can get discouraged so easily when we don't start to see results right away.
Oh, you asked the best questions. Yeah. So the hard part with these conditions is you will notice some resolution of symptoms, but they are very they affect the limbic system very much, which are these different brain structures that really affect our ability to perceive threats and act on those threats. So what ends up happening is people feel really hopeless, Courtney, with these conditions. And I remember, this is just a totally personal anecdote. I had a moment because I was in a neck brace. Part of this was like this whole hypermobility flare. And I'll talk about the word flare too. And I looked in the mirror and I literally said, I don't think I'm going to make it out of this. Like, I just don't see it. I couldn't walk a step without my heart rate going up to 160. I literally, to get from my computer, and I'm like a dietitian, I'm like an active, healthy person, you know, who's worked very hard on my health, to get from my computer chair, my desk chair, to the bathroom. I had to take the chair to the bathroom because anytime I stood up, I would get so dizzy, which is like a whole other, the POTS is a different conversation. But I looked at myself and I said, I don't think you're going to get better. And then the other part of my brain said, if you ever say that again, Michelle, you aren't going to. Like, we can't give ourselves much leeway with these conditions because that kind of black hole feeling will come up. So you have to be really strong with yourself and just say, we're not even talking like that. Cause it's that serious. Honestly, it's not a choice. So there's actually these limbic system retraining programs too, called like the Gupta program or Primal Trust. And they literally retrain your brain to not assess for threats so much, because that's really what the problem is that you're firing all the time on everything. Essentially, it's an overactive nervous and immune system response, essentially. So I would say that that's really important when people are starting and the mindset is there. They will notice some resolution of symptoms in some areas, but it might pop up in like a different area. And then you kind of have to go with your flare. So if we talk about POTS for a second, POTS is that heart rate dizziness kind of condition, which basically what happens is that you'll stand up. Someone, like, for instance, they might feel like they're going to faint in a shower, or they might get red blotches on their skin from showering. And essentially because showers cause something called vasodilation, which is when your blood vessels widen. There's a hint here. Histamines also cause vasodilation. So I think MCAS and POTS are very related to each other, which is not often acknowledged. I don't actually think you can have POTS without MCAS, by the way, but that's my own theory. But your blood vessels will widen. So what happens is you're standing up, all the blood drops down to your feet. And then your heart, because it's not constricting and bringing the blood flow back up, you get dizzy and your heart goes, oh my God, we don't have any blood flow, and starts freaking out and starts pounding really fast. So then you see a really high heart rate. Your feet look red because there's blood flow down at your feet. So sometimes people will get like an MCAS flare. So they'll get a weird rash, but then they won't get the dizziness stuff. So that's good. You have to see with your flares and with what your body's telling you where your symptoms are. So for someone who has POTS, we would often recommend compression socks, something that keeps blood flowing, a lot of salt, honestly, so that you get a good blood flow and pump back to your heart. It really depends. So people are going to notice some better symptoms in some ways, and some things will get worse. And it is a journey. I will tell you also, when it comes to the histamine stuff, it takes like 3 months to get rid of the histamines that have been degranulated. So you might, unless you're on medication or on a very supportive herbal protocol or supplement protocol, there will be some symptoms for a bit, but it absolutely can get better. And I've seen complete resolution of symptoms in myself and many other clients now. And now it's like once every 3 months, it's like, okay, you literally didn't sleep all week because you were working all the time and you treated your body like trash. And now you're like dizzy. Like, yeah, it's going to, you're still a person. You still have to, treat yourself like a person, but you can just end up in much more infrequent and less severe flares.
Okay. So that you mentioned flares, and this is really important, I think, for people to understand too, is that once you start to resolve and heal, a lot of people fear, oh, what happens if I get triggered? What happens if it all comes back and this whole thing starts to crash down? Because, we live with this. It's like, okay, I haven't felt this good in a long time. Like, I'm terrified though of going back. So what are the things that you're seeing where people have healed, or they are on this pathway of healing, and then maybe there's like some kind of trigger, right, that induces this flare? So describe what the flare would be, and then maybe what some of those triggering things are. Are they nervous system? Are they exposures? Are they lack of nutrients? Like you said, diet, whatever. Because I think that can eliminate some of the fear around the flare being, oh no, now we're going back. And so I think people being able to troubleshoot their health is like so valuable, because we are not just like healed and then that's it. Like, I have my stuff, you have your stuff. We're learning how to use the tools for our individual bodies. So the best thing that you guys can gain from this is, okay, I got the tools to get me healing, but I also know what to do when those times come where I have a flare, so that I'm not like completely unhinged and the wheels fall off and I'm in a full blown panic attack. It's like, I know how to step in. I know where to slow down. I know what to bring in. I think could be a really critical part of the conversation. So I'll take it away on the flares and all of that surrounds it.
It's so important what you're saying. This is kind of the meat and potatoes of these conditions. Are all intended to be like, they're syndromes, except for hypermobility. POTS and MCAS are syndromes, but they slap a diagnosis on you in those offices. They are intended to be lifelong diagnoses. So in some way, these conditions force you to live differently. And that's usually a good thing. They force you to slow down. They force you to be in touch with your body. You will not do well if you don't listen to your body in these conditions. And, I'll give you an example of a flare or something. So like, I never have chemical reactivity. Like, I do not, like, if there's bleach smells, things like that, other people can smell it one time with MCAS and they're in a flare for a week. And that flare looks like a full body. They lost their ability to swallow. They have severe sinus congestion. I mean, literally the muscles in their throat, like they feel like they can't swallow. They have hives all over their body. They're running to the bathroom, severe nausea, anything like, and severe tremors and everything from being exposed to that thing one time. So the goal is always, how do we build that body's resilience to the environment? And that's going to happen in a couple different ways. But without a doubt, if you have that diagnosis of MCAS, which is very hard to get, and we'll talk about that too, you are going to have these things called flares. Usually those flares look different for each person, right? So I never had this chemical reactivity, and then someone cleaned my apartment and they bleached every single inch of it, and I was like, and then I like, my eyes were watering and I was like, oh, I'm having a total reaction to this, which I think all humans probably do on some level, but it was reactive for me. And I was like, okay. And that set me into a flare. I think what people need to do is realize what those triggers are. Like you said, it could be an environmental trigger. It could be a mental trigger. It could be a trauma. It could be that you exercised too hard and the body was trying to repair after the exercise. It could be you have a very intense schedule in ways of you're not sleeping properly. It could be any kind of toxic exposure. It could be like a food poisoning. It could literally be you take a supplement and that supplement just didn't hit right for some reason that week. It just wasn't your time to take that supplement. Other very common triggers of flares is different menstrual cycle changes. So this is a very weird specific thing. Okay. This is like a dead ringer for people who live in highly sensitive bodies. When I was experiencing symptoms and my clients do, I remember going into Reddit and literally typing, why do I feel so weird after my period ends? Because normally you only hear about PMS. I was always getting symptoms on day 9 of my cycle and day 21. And so that's when I started to draw that bridge between estrogen and histamine. So it's really actually when your estrogen starts rising. So this was always the problem, is that I couldn't identify what was going to happen. Now I know day 9, I'm like, don't mess around and find out. Don't go crazy and like be working 15 hours. Like my drug of choice is like compulsively working. Like don't be working 15 hours, looking at unnatural light, not going into nature, not doing things you love, not eating for 7 hours because you're forgetting to eat. That's where you need to like kind of prep and prepare for if a flare does happen. And then you'll go into somewhat of like a flare management package tools, right? So if I feel a little bit dizzy, I'm like, let me get my electrolytes, let me get my compression socks on, let me get to work. I know what I need to do. What everyone needs to do is first find out what are your symptoms and how are they happening cyclically and what are your triggers. Then you can troubleshoot either avoiding triggers in the beginning or a flare management package for yourself of essentially, what can I do when this comes up and this happens? And I know myself, I know when it's a histamine thing or it's a POTS thing. It'll really depend. If I'm like, if I go to an amusement park in the heat and I'm standing all day, like I know I'm bringing my compression socks with me because I'm not going to get that blood flow. I know I'm bringing my element with me, like my electrolytes. That's where people can start to look and say, what is it that triggers me? How do I feel when this happens? And the relief I felt when I learned this estrogen period piece of the puzzle, because I was like, oh my God, this happens every month on day 9. So it just feels that predictability of our bodies feels very safe. And it's really important to learn you and learn what triggers you.
Are there certain things you do for estrogen? Like, is there anything specifically that you are doing to either help support estrogen metabolism, or like, what is it? What's the mechanism there with hormones? Because I bet a lot of women are like, oh wait, that might be me. Like, I for sure have like routine things, every couple weeks where I'm feeling something fun, a little bit off. And so, and hormonally speaking, like you said, like our hormones are changing day to day to day. So that could be one of those things. If you're just like, yeah, I'm noticing that it's like twice a month, just like clockwork, that I have, a day or 2 days where I don't feel good. So what is that mechanism of action? And you explained a little bit about some of the things you're doing, but for somebody that's like, yeah, that might be me. Is there anything else you would add to that?
Yeah, I would say that you can either do things to support estrogen detox. Like some people do really well with a DIM supplement or something like that. It depends on where your estrogen detox issues are. So you'd need to see like a Dutch test probably to know if that is an estrogen detox issue.
Yeah.
Estrogen and histamine have a direct relationship, much like acid reflux. So the more estrogen goes up, the more histamines released. So you can either deal with the symptoms of the histamine release. I have many clients who have to go on like some sort of like non-hormonal birth control, like to just alter their hormones. And like, this isn't something that I usually find very helpful for mast cell people because it's usually a huge trigger for mast cells, but you have to do what I think you have to leave all tools on the table. So sometimes I'll have people prophylactically do like really heavy antihistamine work before this happens. I'll have people be like, I'm like, don't move too much that day. Don't do a heavy workout, whatever that trigger is. But yes, absolutely. People use DIM. They might eat a little bit more cruciferous veg just to help move things through the liver a little more. They might do a castor oil pack on that day. Anything that will help with drainage and detox. Or anything that's going to not make that huge estrogen dump happen in the first place.
Okay, that's so good to know. And you have groups, right? So like, cause I think this is one of those things that I have found personally that when being a part of like a group where there are a number of people all kind of experiencing the same thing that can troubleshoot, like, hey, I tried this, I did this. It's like, oh, not making sense of my own thing. So I want to even highlight that because I think that if you are not supported in this journey, if you're not like piecing, this is a great interview, guys, for like those of you listening where you may be able to all of a sudden have the ability to see something you didn't see. However, the healing journey, and I'd love for you to even talk about this. If you're somebody that's like, I suspect that this is me, what do you feel like the recipe for success is for that person? Do they need an individual practitioner to have like an official diagnosis? Do they, where are you seeing, like, what are the people that are experiencing the long-term results? What is it that they're doing? Because the last thing I would want is for somebody to be like, okay, yeah, I think this is me and I'm going to try and do some of this stuff, but I don't have all the information. Right. I mean, I think it takes a number of people. Like you've got to find your tribe of people. And you've worked enough in this space and you've created a lot of resources. So what does that formula for success look like? Where should people be spending their time, their money, their resources to really set them up for long-term success in this?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I ended up after just experiencing these symptoms and being like, there's not one practitioner and not one place online where there's any information for me. It didn't exist. Like it really doesn't. Yes, there's places where there's histamine intolerance information, MCAS, but I never felt like someone was talking to me and I needed someone to talk to me. So I created an information center instead of a group. I went back and forth. Is this going to be a group or an information center? Courtney, what my fear was in creating a group is that if there's one person in the group who says, I'm never going to heal, I'm scared for every other member in the group. I really thought about that because I'm telling you, it's so delicate with these syndromes and conditions that could be enough. Like if I heard that on my healing journey, it could have taken me out. And so I had to basically what I did was I pulled 15 of the best practitioners who've all personally had these experiences, all my HSBs, my highly sensitive body friends and colleagues, all different types, PTs, doctors, dietitians, nutritionists, somatic experiencing practitioners, every type of practitioner you can imagine who's personally dealt with these conditions and made an information center. And what I did was I wanted to make kind of like a Reddit for this information because it's not like you can go to a PubMed and type why dizzy during day 9 of cycle. Like it's not you're not going to get any information from a journal study perspective. So what I did was I staggered it into courses about each condition. And then also you can search by the symptom you have. So it's like dizziness, go to those videos and handouts and resources. Period changes, go to the hormone section. Pregnancy in this, go to that. So it's basically like all these different practitioners who specialize in this, they came in and I made a lot of the videos, but they also contributed a tremendous amount of videos, handouts, and then a lot of just tools that you can use. Like how do you actually flare track. And if you're just a person who doesn't have these diagnoses, it doesn't matter. It's really just that place for you to get information in a way when you need it. Like, cause that's the thing is like, it's 3 a.m. and people are typing, why insomnia after IV? You know, it's like that, like there's nowhere to get the information. They just go to Reddit. That's what people honestly do because you at least hear from people who had those experiences and we explain the science and give very tangible tools. Do I think I have a whole team of practitioners if people wanted to work one-on-one, but if this also sounds or feels like you, sometimes the information is the weapon. Sometimes you just need to do it yourself and that's enough too. And I think my practitioners are awesome. Obviously, we wouldn't be working together and we wouldn't be creating one-on-one services, but I also think that there's so much you can do. And the magic sauce of the people who heal, you asked that beautiful question, is the people who know themselves. There's probably 2 differentiating factors between the people who really do well and don't, is they believe they can heal. It sounds corny. And they DIY it. I think that they just start playing with, they get to know themselves in a huge way. I would also say that outside of the Highly Sensitive Body Hub, which is this information center, starting off with something like Primal Trust or the Gupta program is an amazing place to start, that limbic system retraining, because what a lot of us don't realize is these conditions become chronic when our limbic system and our brain get involved. So what happens is we have a symptom, and it'll be like, let's say it's dizziness. Then the dizziness turns into, oh my God, why am I so dizzy? I can't believe this is happening again. I'm never going to heal. And then that signal goes through your brain, back down through your nervous system and through the rest of your body to indicate, oh, we should not send blood flow here. We should make the heart stop doing this. We should change our digestion. And then the symptoms become chronic. It's not actually the initial symptom that's usually the problem. It's that our body keeps reacting and trying to defend and saying, I never want this to happen again. How do I prevent it? And then our worlds, as a result, get so freaking small, Courtney, because we just want to prevent any pain and discomfort, which is reasonable. But if you can crack into that cycle, like you have a symptom and you're like, I hate this, but I do notice it. And instead of saying, oh my God, what can I do to fix it? Why is this happening? Take a deep breath and say, this is happening right now. This is temporary. And like it always has before, it'll pass. Let the body kind of understand that, understand you're a teammate with your body. And then of course we have all these solutions, that you can use too. But I think that moment of changing, like the reaction to the symptoms seems to be the most important part of a healing journey. I think for even my clients just losing weight, I think that the urgency we feel around weight loss, that gut punch we feel when we feel like we're not in a body that suits us, that's what drives the binge eating. That's what drives a lot of those things. So it's just about being non-reactive to our own symptoms in whatever way we can.
You just painted such a perfect picture. And I think that this is such a valuable tool. If you can break out of the habits of condemning yourself or shaming yourself, get out of the toxic cycles of putting yourself down, because that really puts the ceiling on your healing. It's like the command center is your brain and you are instructing your flesh that, no, you're not going to get better. You don't deserve to be better. Like this is the best it will ever be. And that is so limiting. But honestly, that is like poison for your soul. You are like drinking poison. So, and then we wonder why like our relationships, like everything gets affected, everything. So it's like, it's the manifestation in the flesh is just, it's like the tip of the iceberg. It will start to trickle out because that's the overflow that there is no overflow, right? To live in, there is no grace for yourself. There's no grace for others. So if you can't love yourself, how many times have we heard this? The capacity at which you love yourself is how you'll be able to love other people. So if you are disgusted with yourself, you speak unkindly to yourself, you don't even have the capacity to speak that to your children. So then now we're not even speaking life in our home. So we start to just now germinate seeds of death everywhere around us. And that's like, I know that sounds dramatic, but it's really, if you start to think about it, that's what you're doing. You are either sowing seeds of fruit or you are sowing seeds of death. You have the choice, and your words and your thoughts are what activates on those. So you have to choose. It's a decision that you have to make, and it's a behavior you have to live out. And it's so important that we realize that that is a reflection of our body. But here's like, even today, I was up with kids till like 11:30 last night because, oh my gosh, there was just like multiple things happening. And, one kid felt bad and then the other one hurt her feelings and all this stuff. So, it was like 11 o'clock and I was like, I'm so tired and I got to get up at like 4:30 in the morning, start my day. And I was like, I'm going to be so tired. And even this morning, I was like, I just do not have that much energy. But instead of being like bitter towards my kids, and because we have a choice, we could like now get up and be like, my whole Monday is just going to be like crappy because I'm not recovered, didn't get enough sleep. I just start asking myself like, okay, body, I hear you. I know you're tired. So we're going to probably be craving a lot of carbs early in the day because our body's under recover. We didn't get enough sleep. So I am like already planning as soon as the baby goes down for a nap, I'm laying down for like, whatever I need, 30 minutes, 50 minutes. I just can't. I know my house is a mess, but it is actually more important for me to lay down because my night was disrupted. So start asking yourself as soon as those questions come up, just be like, okay, body, I hear you. Like, what are you trying to tell me? Like, because that now it becomes a question of how can I support my body? Whereas it's instead of just like, oh, here we go again, and how many of us get stuck? I mean, I've done it a million times. So, I'm not saying that I've like figured it out, but I'm realizing it is a choice. We do have to choose how we're going to frame our health and how we're going to frame our life. And if it's always going to be this is the best it's going to be, then you're right. It probably is probably the best it will be.
Yes. I mean, I so resonate with what you're saying on a personal, professional level. It sounds like we're talking in this intangible way, but it's very tangible. And I'll back up what you're saying even more, which is that postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, POTS, that dizziness thing. It's actually classified as a dysautonomia. It means dysfunction of your autonomic nervous system because your brain tells the rest of your body, where do I send blood flow? What muscles should I contract? That is the command center of the body, like you said. So it's actually a brain thing, not a heart thing. So a lot of times people have a huge problem getting this diagnosed because they go to cardiologists and they're like, it's not actually a cardiology problem. Your heart's fine. Your EKG looks perfect. It has nothing to do with your heart function. It's the brain telling the body, where do I send this blood flow? Should I let it drop down to our feet? Should I leave our blood vessels wide open? So everything, all of mast cells are extremely responsive to the nervous system. They hear everything you're saying. So if you say that sentence, that forbidden sentence that I said that none of you are allowed to ever say, I'm not going to be able to heal, you're damn right. You are not going to be able to heal. It's absolutely 100% true. And it is very scientific. It's very tangible. It's quite tangible. These are dysfunctions of the autonomic nervous system. So literally our nervous system is listening to us all the time. And our nervous system only learns through experience and example. So that's the problem, is that we can be like, you feel great. And our nervous system's like, I've never felt great. So I don't believe you at all. So you kind of have to feel better at some point and then be like, told you could feel better, because the nervous system will not act in a certain way unless you actually feel better or safer. So anything you can do to enhance safety, and it's like corny, but you have to fake it till you make it a little bit with these conditions. You have to just be like, all right, this really stinks. Courtney's like, I woke up, I'm extremely tired. I am going to need these carbs today. I don't love it, but I'm going to make it through this. And it's just temporary. It's how I feel right now.
Yeah, that's so fascinating what you just said too, because what I'm hearing is that you can ultimately be training yourself. You can train your nervous system and you don't realize it, but it's the patterns, right? It's the habits over and over and over create the systems in which you operate from. And it can dysregulate the autonomic nervous system, the thing that you're not having to think about. That is what is getting trained subconsciously based on the patterns and choices you do in your life. So like you said, it seems like it's abstract and it's like, oh my gosh, I just want to know the protocol. I just want to know my food. I want to know my supplements. But it's the heart issues. It's the stuff that you can't see that is the hardest things for us to grasp. But those are the things that are going to solidify the future of your health. Like we just can't. We can't have enough emphasis on that, because I see that being a barrier. It's a barrier for me. It's a barrier. I see it everywhere. So I know that it's real. And I also know that once we can get a handle on this and really start to press into it, we can really start to see how the positive response of the body can just start to accelerate. Like the little things that you're doing with your diet and with your supplements now have momentum behind them, right? Because you supported the infrastructure in the right way. So now when you bring in like the physical stuff, it's just adding, fuel to the tank, and it just starts running and accelerating. You're not having to try or think harder because you addressed the broken systems that were attached to the breakdown in your physical body.
Heck yes. And I will also say that, you know, on social media right now, everything's the nervous system, the vagus nerve. I think we're getting too scientific about it in a way that's not helping people anymore. Just make yourself feel safe. That's it. Yeah. What makes you feel safe? And what makes us feel safe as human beings is feeling heard and understood by ourselves and others. So make yourself feel heard and understood. And in whatever way you can, bring safety into your life. And that is like the most healing and important thing, because that nervous system is so related to all these other body systems. And I think, yes, it's amazing to do like gargling and like, you know, ice packs on your neck and all these things for the vagus nerve. But the name of the game is safety and kind of like positivity, I guess. You know, it's like really believing and laying, like you said, that path forward for the systems to function. But I will tell you from the bottom of my heart, Courtney, these symptoms that people are experiencing are the worst I've ever seen. And I've never been more hopeful in my entire life. I've never been more hopeful because I think we really get the operating system now, whereby before people were not getting it. And I think functional medicine needs to catch up a little bit, because there's still a lot of like mold, parasite, you know, IVs, like cold therapy, infrared sauna, and that stuff's awesome, but not if your body is not in the place to receive it. But because I've seen what looks like this like miraculous healing in people now, I've never been more hopeful about where we're going. I've never been more hopeful. And I will tell you, I think COVID was a big messenger to a lot of us that our bucket of what we can tolerate was we had no nutrients in our bodies. We were overworked, over-exercised, like legitimately. Yeah. That bucket was so overfilled. And then COVID just knocked that bucket over, and all of us had to reevaluate how we live our lives, honestly. Yeah. So I think in that way, it was a little bit of a blessing, because it showed us you better slow down, because it's not going to work if we keep doing this.
Oh, amen. I mean, it's so good. I second all of that, because it is, nobody wants to be disrupted. But like you said, that disruption of COVID exposed some things that needed to have a light shined on them, because I think we just get doing our thing. And like, you know, we'll compromise a little bit here and there and things start to get a little bit bad. But when the tables get overturned, everything has to get evaluated, because now it's like, I don't know what's up and what's down. I don't know what's working. This isn't like what I've not had to address this type of stuff before. And so we're having to now start understanding our body on a much deeper level, have more compassion for ourselves, and be strategic in what we're exposing ourselves to, what we're choosing to bring into our lives. Like, we need to be able to do that. And we can't just trust that like everyone's opinion, everybody in this world now, it seems like, has a microphone. Like, everybody's on social, everybody's got an opinion. It's just like chatter. And I'm like, I want to know what the substance of like longevity in real life. I'm not here to play games. I'm not here to waste time. Like, and if you have faith or a spiritual, connection of like, I have purpose in my life, then you know that like this, we only have one shot and one timeline to work with. And I'm not here to just like jump in and dive into all the chatter. Like, I want to be able to help people. I want to be able to know that what I'm doing is like meaningful and it's what I'm meant to do. And so that's why we have these conversations. And I love that you're the only person that I know, like you said, in this space that's like really giving a voice to that person, but you're also equipping and you're helping people understand it for themselves instead of just like it being so complex, which it very much can be. Things like MCAS and POTS, like, yeah. I mean, even as a practitioner, when I worked with people, I was like, oh, this is like, I don't know, but you are simplifying it in a way where we actually can understand it and now know, okay, here's what I'm working with. Here's what I can do to help support myself. Here are the tools that I may need. So I just appreciate so much of your voice in this space and really honoring people by acknowledging what it is that they're really going through, first and foremost, and then really giving them that hope. Like, hey, I've seen it get really bad. Like, you are not wrong. What you're experiencing is rough. Mm-hmm. It is bad. I've been there and I've seen it in a lot of people. However, you've also seen the miracles. You've seen the healing. You've seen how these things can work for people. 100%. And I think, again, I give slack to like the people in the online health space who are trying to they're excited about a protocol or something like that. But like you said, the jig is up. It's just like, are you helping people or not? Are you seeing people for what they're experiencing or not? And I'm loving that I feel like the real healers and the real people are starting to shine in a big way, because it's so obvious that these kind of cookie cutter recommendations, they just are so detrimental. And I'm so glad to see that's where the light is too, is like, I'm seeing the real, like, I call it like a practitioner's practitioner, those people who are like on the ground
really in it with people. I've seen them come to light so much. So I promise anyone who's listening to this, I couldn't even walk to my bathroom. Trust me. I understand. I couldn't hold my neck up to do, I had a neck brace on when I was podcasting because I was like, I'm still going to podcast, even though I could not hold my neck up. And, now I can do any activity I did before and more. It is entirely possible to heal. If you have a genetic condition like hypermobility, maybe you can't fix that. But if you can fix your perception and you can fix your lifestyle, you always can get some sort of benefit. Do I mean that you can fix a genetic thing? No, I don't mean that you can fix a genetic thing, but I mean that you can change the way that you live your life and your experience of living life. And that is what I am like so hopeful for. There's no person who can come through my door that I will ever feel pity for, hopeless about. There's always something that can be done. And I'll leave just this one little anecdote too. My aunt got diagnosed with stage 4 brain cancer, which is like the diagnosis you don't want. It's like the one, glioblastoma. It's like the word you never want to come out of a doctor's mouth. And she looked at me and was like, she's like, I was planning to live 50 more years. And I'm like, I'm planning for you to live 50 more years too, by the way. I was like, I have no intention. So we put her on like this very specific protocol that was specific to her, the genetic makeup of the actual tumor. And she's doing fantastic. Now I have to be honest, that is absolutely not because of us. That is a lot of luck that happened too. But the mindset of her is, in my opinion, which was the biggest piece. So you can't even come to me with glioblastoma, and I'm not going to say there's something we can do. There's just no condition that there's not something that can be done and that you should ever feel hopeless. There's always something that you can do.
Yeah, man, what a story. I mean, that's like an incredible testimony, to just all of those pieces coming together to produce healing. And I think that's been like threaded through our whole conversation. That's incredible. And I'm excited for somebody listening that maybe is feeling disheartened and disappointed and discouraged, because I am hopeful that you see the potential for your healing and that that there is significance, and there's significance in you even landing on this podcast. I mean, I fully believe that. Every single guest I have on here, I'm like, I was meant at this point in time to be interviewing this person because it's for someone. I don't know, whenever it's real, it's just, I believe that. And so, I'm just prayerful for those of you listening that have been really discouraged, kind of feeling like you're out of options and you're just at the bottom of the barrel emotionally, that this is lifting you to a new place, to elevate your eyes, to see maybe something that no one else has caught. And that it's pointing you in the direction of some resources that will help you. So I'm just so grateful to have you, Michelle. You're beautiful. You are so, you're just so like knowledgeable. There's like a deep bucket we could just unpack forever. But I love, you also have a podcast, and I want to be able to give you a moment to share some of those resources like the hub, your podcast, how to get connected with some of your practitioners, where all of these things are that you've put your hand on, because if you're looking to go a little bit deeper, this might be the place for you to start digging and unpacking.
So you can join the Highly Sensitive Body Hub, which is, and we'll give a link to that, which is our information center for all things highly sensitive bodies. We also have a quiz. Are you living in a highly sensitive body? To determine that, I have a podcast called the Quiet the Diet podcast. It originally was made to just be this nutritional nuance, functional medicine and nutrition space. And there's a lot of episodes on just actual nutrition topics, but always with this really nuanced approach. So if we're talking about weight loss, we're also taking into account our relationship with food. It's kind of anti-diet and anti-diet. It's a little bit of middle ground on all these topics. And then there's a lot on these highly sensitive body topics now as well. And then you can work with our team one-on-one. We're a team of 5 practitioners. I'll give you the application to apply to work with us. The way it works is people apply, and then we pair you with the practitioner who works with those conditions or goals that you have. It's also like a little bit of a spiritual process, because I just like feel what energies really become aligned. So we have a lot of different specialists who work with different conditions. We're all nutritionists, some different dietitians, some different types of nutritionists, and we pair you basically with that practitioner. And then you begin your 3 or 6 month work together.
Incredible. Okay. So we'll put all of that in the show notes so you guys can come back to it if you're looking for the details and the specific places for you to access her information, her website, practitioner application, all of those things. You're also on Instagram, and you have an amazing, just wealth of resources on there. All of your highlights and the posts and the reels that you're doing. The interviews that you have on your podcast are phenomenal. I love the ones where you're teaching, and I love some of the, many of the guests that you have are just people that I've really respect in the space too. So you're having a lot of those conversations on your own platform. So guys, if you're listening, definitely check her out. Make sure you're following along her journey and all she's doing to help the people that, that you're bringing in. And I think you're doing great work. And so I'm just, praying that there is blessing and favor and multiplication and all of that, because I know that it's having a tremendous impact. So thank you so much for being here, Michelle. This has been so much fun.
Oh my God, what a way to start our day, huh? Even when we're tired, Courtney. Thank you so much.
I feel like this brought like new life. I'm feeling really good now. I was like kicking the kids out the door. I was just like, oh my gosh, this is a little stressful. And then I'm like, we're getting in a flow now. I'm like, oh, I feel this is just, energized me. So yes, our Monday is like our week's off to a good start. So whenever you're listening to it, I hope you feel energized and uplifted. And thank you guys again for tuning in. Michelle, I love you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Leave us a review, share, do all the stuff. We love you guys. We love that you hang out with us, and pray that this is serving you in some great way today. All right, guys, we'll see you on the next episode.